Welcome to Plan 9 Crunch. I'm Doug Gibson. Today is August 15th, 2025, and tomorrow is Bela Lugosi's Death Day. He died in 1956 on August 16th. He died in his bed of a heart attack, and he was discovered by his wife at the time, Hope Lugosi. Bela lived a long life for that time period, 73 years. At Plan 9 Crunch, we love Bela Lugosi. Look at the photo right here. That's by Steve D. Stones, a Bela as Dracula. Steve is part of Plan 9 Crunch. Steve also did the art here, which is our logo at Plan 9 Crunch. But we really want to honor Bela. So what we're going to do today for about a half hour or so is talk about the great Bela Lugosi's 3 final films. Now let me say that even though I love Plan 9 from Outer Space, and he is in it technically, well, I shouldn't say technically, he is in it, that's not really Bela's final film. Because Bela, of course, was dead when that film was made, and they added the scenes. The 3 movies I want to talk about, the first one is directed by Ed Wood, Glen or Glenda. The second, the penultimate film Bela made, was also directed by Ed Wood. It's called Bride of the Monster. And the third was an Allied Artists film. I believe it was directed by Reginald Leborg. And it was called The Black Sleep. So right now, we're going to, before I get going, we're going to talk about Bela. He had been in England doing Dracula for half a year, which really wore him out, to be honest. It was a hard work. He'd have to do a couple shows a day, sometimes more if they were in what you called a, it was kind of a combination theater and beer hall and things like that. And before he left, he made a movie called Mother Riley Meets the Vampire, which you can find on YouTube sometimes as My Son the Vampire or Vampire Over London. You might be able to find Mother Riley Meets the Vampire, the original British version now, because we're so streaming. Bela came back, and he also made a film called Bela Lugosi Meets a Brooklyn Gorilla with Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis imitation group. I believe they were Duke Moore and Semi Petrillo. It's a fun film. It's fun to watch. If you're a Lugosi fan, you'll watch it over and over. If you're not, you may just watch it once. So Lugosi was finding it harder to make some money. He was working hard, and he would get some stage jobs. He was at the Silver Slipper doing a comedy act, playing off his persona in Las Vegas. He would do occasional Dracula performances, maybe one-nighters, and also other work too. But it was getting tougher. And I'm going to talk first about Glen or Glenda, okay? And this is a film that Ed Wood directed, like I said. And there's great, people wonder if Bela actually knew the plot of this movie. But let's look at Glen or Glenda for a second, all right?
Drawing from the endless reaches of time, brings to light many startling things. Startling?
Okay.
Because they seem new.
I just wanted to give you a touch from Glen or Glenda.
But most are not new.
Okay. Bela played the spirit in this film. I suppose Bela was on the set for one day. Wood offered it to Bela Lugosi, and first he turned it down. Now this is interesting, because if you watch the movie Ed Wood, you're given the impression that Bela was already separated from his wife. When this movie was being made, no, she came and said, Bela will do the film for double what you're offering. Glen or Glenda is about a man, played by Ed Wood, who's engaged to a woman named I can't remember the name of the woman in the film, I'm sorry, but it's played by Dolores Fuller. But he likes to wear women's clothing. He's a transvestite, and he doesn't know how to tell her. And the whole story is going to deal with Glen's dilemma, and also a second story, a lesser story at the end, where a man actually has a sex change operation. Now, these were what were called exploitation films back then. And so I'm not 100% sure Bela actually knew the plot of this film, but he became very close friends with Ed Wood, so he must have known. But I sometimes wonder if Bela really knew what he was saying in this film. He played a godlike figure, they call him the spirit, who would comment on things. He introduced the movie. When things were happening on screen, sometimes he'd be looking, and saying, and making conversation. This is a very avant-garde, sort of surrealistic film. There are scenes where Ed Wood's character kneels down to the spirit, and the spirit banishes him and then brings him back. Glenda is only about, slightly more than an hour, maybe an hour 5, hour 6 minutes. But it's a must-see if you're a Bela Lugosi fan, a must-see if you're an Ed Wood fan. You probably have seen it if you are. It's also an excellent film to see if you want film history on exploitation and states' rights movies and things like that. In the book Nightmare of Ecstasy by Rudolph Gray, George Weiss, who produced the movie Glenda, claims it didn't make much money. I actually am skeptical of that. This movie probably didn't cost more than $20,000, and it played all over. It played even the Far East eventually. It played for years. It played in adult theaters, although there's nothing of adult content in this film other than the fact that they're dealing with issues of transvestism and changing your sex later. There's really nothing shown. It's a very tame movie. I think it was pretty high-minded of Wood to be able to do a film like this. I'm not claiming it's a great film. It's a fascinating film. And it's funny because Wood shot about I would say 45, 50 minutes, maybe a little bit more than that, but they needed to be more than an hour. So all near the middle of this film, they go into a montage where you're sometimes transferred back to Lugosi, commenting or looking at it, where it's like, it's not even nudie cutie because they're in lingerie and things like that, but it's the kind of, red light stuff they showed in the 50s, early 50s, of bondage even and whipping people. And it was directed actually by a guy named Merle O'Connell, who was a low-rent director for George Weiss at the time. But so most of the movie, though, of course, is directed by Wood. And Wood included this stuff, so you can consider the director of it. I don't know if Wood included it or not. Maybe Weiss did. But Glenda is a fascinating film, and it's an example of Bela Lugosi really needing work, which was kind of sad because he had accomplished so much and thrilled so many people since Dracula and even before. But he took a film, for a very low-rent company. I believe he probably knew that this was a movie that had nothing to do with horror, to be honest. I wonder if he ever saw it. I doubt he ever saw it, to be honest, although he was good friends with Wood throughout his life, so it's possible. So that's the first movie. That's the third to last film Bela Lugosi made. Now the second one is more interesting, in my opinion, because it's a straight-out horror/science fiction film, and it has the spirit of the monogram films of the 40s that Lugosi made. And this was a film where Bela Lugosi, old, emaciated, working as tough as he could, basically carried the movie. It's called Bride of the Monster, and it almost became an Allied Artists release, which was not big time, but much bigger than being an independent release, which Ed Wood eventually made it. There were talk of having Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, and Lon Chaney in this type of movie. I don't know if it would have stayed the way it was in script, but the same concept. What happens is there's this reclusive scientist who has escaped the Iron Curtain, who's living in the United States. And people are dying or disappearing in the swamp. He lives in the swamp area with his house. And what he's trying to do is create a league of atomic supermen who will conquer the world, as he says. And he was kicked out of, I don't know if it's Russia or Hungary. They don't make that clear. And he's got this guy searching for him. And of course, he got this nosy reporter. What horror film of that era doesn't have a nosy reporter who's trying to figure out what's going on in these marshes? And there's supposedly a monster in the marshes. And Lugosi actually does have a monster. It's a big, giant octopus. And with Lugosi is Tor Johnson, who's also in Plan 9 from Outer Space and Night of the Ghouls and a whole bunch of other movies too. With W.C. Fields, Abbott and Costello, Bob Hope. Tor Johnson was a 350-pound or so Swedish wrestler. We're not going to see that, but I want to show you Lugosi in this film. Take a look at him on the screen with our picture and other things, okay, that gives you an idea of how iconic he could still be despite being, a couple of years from death. So why don't we go where we're going to go to a scene where the reporter's going out to the marsh and she's being captured and Tor Johnson, the monster Lobo, is bringing her in. That's stock footage. There's Loretta King. She plays Janet Lawler, the reporter. That's Tor Johnson as Lobo. Oh, Ed Wood liked Angora, so Tor had to sniff her Angora. That's the house where Lugosi stays. Now here you'll see Bela.
All right now, my dear.
Who are you?
I'm Dr. Eric Vornov. You had a severe shock.
How did I get here?
Oh, that's not important for the moment. What you need now is rest. Rest. You will sleep. Sleep. For the lovely young lady. Sleep.
Okay. Now I wanted to show that scene, particularly near the end, because Lugosi used well, in the film, Lugosi they show the eyes only of Lugosi, and that reminds me a bit of White Zombie. And he also moves his hands in a certain way that I think is evocative of the classic film White Zombie also. Lugosi gave a yeoman's performance in this film. This is not a great film. It's probably the most commercial, most conventional film that Ed Wood ever made. I think Ed Wood never saw any money, but it made a lot of money for the backers in the 50s. It played in many, many theaters, The Black Sleep, probably well into the early 60s. And because this is being directed by Ed Wood and Bela Lugosi starring in it, it becomes something special, something unique. I'm not going to tell you this is a great film, but I love it. I watch it all the time, and I think it's the last great film Bela Lugosi ever made. It belongs among the top 6 or 7 films he made. Because there's a scene we're not going to show where the guy trying to find him for the communists talks to him, and he's trying to bring him to come back. He's telling him to come home, and Lugosi says, "Home? I have no home. All my life I was hunted." He was kicked out for his ideas, treated like a madman. I'm paraphrasing. But then he says, "Here in this forsaken jungle hell, I am proven that I am all right. And the fact that he said all right is very interesting, because I think here he is in the end of his career. He didn't say I'm right. He said I'm all right. I'm still here. I'm still able to make great art. And Bride of the Monster is a personal triumph for Bela Lugosi, carrying a movie when because soon after he made this film, he had to be treated for an addiction to medicine that he was taking for his sciatica. And you see him as being rather gaunt in the film also. One thing is interesting, he looks a lot older in this film than he looked in Glen or Glenda. So that's his penultimate film. Now let's go to the last movie Bela Lugosi ever made. It's called The Black Sleep. There's Bela.
Good evening, Casimir.
Okay, Jack. The Black Sleep is kind of a sad movie if you're a Bela Lugosi fan. It's wonderful to see him in a movie. But he was not allowed any speaking role. This movie was made within the last year of Bela's life. He had kicked his drug habit for the pain. He got married to a woman named Hope Lininger, who had been sort of a... Now, I like Hope. I'm not an anti-Hope person, like some people are. But she had basically pursued Lugosi for 25 years. You can find old clippings where she writes letters about him and things like that. And she was a script worker at RKO, and she sent him letters when he was in rehab, signed A Dash of Hope. And obviously for a man very sick and trying to recover, it meant a lot to him. And he impulsively asked her to marry him, which was something she wanted to always be, Mrs. Bela Lugosi. And they got married, but reality hit in. Lugosi was probably more than 30 years older than Hope. And she was looking at a man who was very old, really unable to take care of himself, and also quite depressed that his acting career was down the tubes now. And they stayed married till his death, but I've read that he had been planning to leave the marriage. This is not any attack on Hope Lugosi, who I think was a good woman who lived a dignified life afterwards. She worked with lepers in Hawaii late in her life. And she was even friends with Ed Wood 10, 15 years afterwards, because I've seen photos of her visiting Wood and other friends. But anyways, The Black Sleep is a kind of movie that's well produced for a low budget film. I mean, it's a lot slicker than anything Ed Wood ever made, but it doesn't have Wood's brand of creativity, a unique creativity that no one can match. Just the kind of cult-like status. It stars Basil Rathbone as a doctor who helps a former patient who's going to be executed to take something called the Black Sleep, which feigns death. Then he resuscitates him and asks him to help do all these brain surgeries to help restore his wife, who is unconscious. Well, what eventually happens is these brain surgeries aren't working, and there's a whole bunch of badly disfigured people in the castle or the mansion where he lives. And I don't want to give the entire plot, but besides Rathbone, also Tor Johnson, who we just saw, is in this movie. Lon Chaney Jr. is in this movie also. Trying to think of any other names that might ring with people. It's a good programmer. Frankly, there's a movie called The Unearthly that was made a few years later for a lower budget by a director named Brooke Peters. Also had Tor Johnson. Oh, John Carradine is in The Black Sleep. Also, in The Unearthly, John Carradine plays the Basil Rathbone role. And The Unearthly, which came out, like I said, 2 or 3 years later, I think it's a better film than Black Sleep, frankly. It's the same plot. And Tor Johnson's in The Unearthly also. Bela desperately wanted to speak in this film. He really did. And allegedly, they did film scenes with him speaking. He begged the director. They did, but they decided not to put them in the film. So Bela didn't have much to do with this movie other than sit around, make some facial expressions, and be involved in scenes. He just didn't talk at all. And like I said, it was a bit bittersweet. His life was coming to a close. They tub-thumped The Black Sleep, Lon Chaney, Basil Rathbone, Bela Lugosi, and others. They went on the road doing promotions for it. And there's a tale, I don't think it's apocryphal, I think it's real, where Lugosi got drunk. He was drinking too much at the end of his life. And it was disappointment over his marriage, I think, and his career. But somebody called, it may have been Tor Johnson who called Hope Lugosi, all right, and said, Bela's threatening to jump out the window. They were on the 3rd or 4th floor of the hotel. And the very acerbic reply from Hope was, open a window. Now, I don't think she was being serious, okay, but she had a sort of misanthrope personality. And Bela, being a Hungarian, being a man of his era, had a very pessimistic view on life and things like that, particularly the tough times he was having. But still, even in The Black Sleep, and even a very skinny Bela Lugosi still shows screen presence. Lugosi never lost his screen presence. And he was, like I said, in between these 3 movies, he was trying to work as much as he could. By this time, The Black Sleep, he was basically just, he was staying at home, to be honest. And Hope Lugosi later said that 3 or 4 days before he died, he woke up afraid. He said like Karloff was in there talking to him, and he was afraid of death, and they talked about death and everything, she and her husband. He also had a young friend, a teenager named Richard Sheffield, who's passed away now, but wrote a book with Gary Rhodes on Bela's work in the 1950s. And I don't know if I should say this, but once again, I hope this is not apocryphal. I'm not doing any disrespectful. But Dick started a fan club. It really was a nice friend to Lugosi. They go to movies, but Lugosi called him in tears one time and said, what am I going to do? I no longer get the big prick, which means he was impotent at the time, all right? So Bela lived to be 73, had a tough last time, but he never stopped working. His final film was released, a few months before he died. And, of course, the world got to see Plan 9 from Outer Space. There is legend that Lugosi was holding a script called Final Curtain, which was later made as a short, and you can find on YouTube now, where he would have played the actor. I don't know if that's really true. Okay, some people have disputed that when he died. But we want to pay tribute to Bela Lugosi on his death day on August 16th. He is Dracula. There have been many, many people playing Dracula, but the most iconic person to portray Count Dracula remains Bela Lugosi. Sorry, Christopher Lee, you did a great job. Sorry, Gary Oldman, you did a good job too. Sorry, Jack Palance, you did a good job too. Sorry, Lon Chaney Jr., you did a good job too. But Dracula remains iconically Bela Lugosi. He is what you think about when you think of Dracula and the Vampire, created by Bram Stoker. So, we hope you enjoy Bela's death day tomorrow. Watch a couple of his movies. You can watch the biggies like Dracula and Abbott and Costello Meet Dracula, or The Wolfman. But you can watch like The Black Cat or The Raven, or Murders in the Rue Morgue. But you also might want to go to YouTube or Internet Archive and watch some of his low-budget films like Bride of the Monster, or watch The Invisible Ghost, which is a wonderful movie. The Ape Man is a lot of fun. So is The Corpse Vanishes. There are a lot of Bela Lugosi's you can watch. I'm Doug Gibson. We're Plan 9 Crunch. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. You can like us on TikTok or on Facebook, which is Plan 9 Crunch Podcast and Blog. And we have plan9crunch.com, which is our blog in which we have reviewed many of these films we talked about. Thank you very much. Happy Bela Lugosi Day. And that's a wrap.